wanted to take this chance and thank you for hanging out for a little bit. And this is an opportunity to ask questions, and it would really help me to understand what's going on in the lives. And I think we're dealing with a big topic with access to reproductive health for women, and that's certainly a big topic that is coming up in this election. So I guess my question kind of going to be to you, to come back to me, is what would you like to know from your political candidates about reproductive health, abortion, or, is that an issue for you in this upcoming election?
If you were to become lieutenant governor, and I know that Aaron Ford, the attorney general, has worked on basically making Nevada a state where we have a choice. Would you back that choice up that he's already decided for us? Or what is your stance on abortion? I would really like to know from your point of view, but also if I could go back and ask some of these other candidates that question, because this is dividing the country.
The question comes down to what is the proper role of government. And this really, when you talk about law and enforcing law, you're now talking about the police power. So how many resources are we going to dedicate to enforcing a particular law? With regard to right to access to abortion, in 1990, the public, by ballot initiative, codified into Nevada statute the right to access an abortion up to 24 weeks, and that abortion be performed by a physician. The way that works is no elected official or the legislature can change that language. It can only be changed by the people directly by a ballot initiative. And that's in the Nevada Constitution, Article 19 of the Nevada Constitution. Not all states, I think this is an important detail, not all states have that public referendum process. And Nevada does, because Nevada has always wanted the people to have power and to check legislatures, acknowledging that sometimes a legislature can have a momentum that goes in a direction that the people don't want. So as far as access in Nevada, there is law that is just unchangeable. So I am a big fan of the people's voice, so I support the Constitution and I support their words. Now, public polling shows that only 17% of Nevadans really think this is an issue in the upcoming election. They're much more concerned with the economy and jobs. But it is an issue because it is, as many of you understand, it's the impact of the decision is the states are now kicking in. So the Nevadans of 1990 put it in the statute to keep it there. So I support the law.
And I guess you mentioned that abortion is up to 24 weeks, correct? And then after that?
That's right. And so the statute says up to 24 weeks.
Okay. With that statute, and you said it being able to be changed, in case, say there were people who say maybe earlier, or would that be something that could be potential in the future?
The only way to change that criteria is by ballot initiative. So and I think it's important because a lot of people, it's a political issue, it's being politicized. And if candidates are running saying they can change the law, they're not running authentically. Only the people can change the law. So even with that, I think candidates are being asked, what would you do? Would you support an initiative or whatever? Since I support the people's law, I want that to be represented. And I am not keen to mess with that. But if the people generally want to do it, they would have to do it. And there's a process for that.
Is there a way that you running for lieutenant governor, will be able to pull the political side, but also work hand in hand with medical forces in order to make sure that abortion is done correctly?
For me, I have a much more medical view, and I highly value the virtue, the ethic in medicine of autonomy. So my master's is in ethics and policy studies, and I studied clinical decision-making and systems morality. So autonomy for both sides. So autonomy for the patient, autonomy for the provider. And since medicine has this power and this skill, depriving people of access to what medicine can do is depriving them of their autonomy and depriving the providers of their autonomy. Big concern is that some of the procedures that are used to help with abortions at different stages and depends on the patient, right? some of these procedures, if the state doesn't allow it or there's some confusion, they're not training doctors on these procedures that could be used for other things. The example I used earlier was, or I will use often, is the DNC procedure, which is used to treat a bunch of different things. Endometriosis, it's even if people have a natural miscarriage, and I am not a doctor, so I don't want to be going too far into that, but I would hate to think that Nevada's medical training is impaired by whether or not someone can practice medicine. So there's also choice there. If we preserve autonomy, we preserve choice. And that means a provider, like those who are affiliated with Catholic facilities, they will not do anything that will terminate a pregnancy. And that's because of the ethical religious directives of Catholic healthcare. That is their choice, and it shouldn't be deprived of that. I think that's really important. I think patient choice is critical.
It feels like the country is divided, just like we always are, because of party affiliation on a topic that should not be a party affiliation.
It has long been a litmus test, and it's always been presumed that Democrats are pro-choice and Republicans are pro-life. But there's no real data that backs that up. I mean, and with the increasing gridlock and the just intense division, and the parties really, you can't divide it up, that binary in a sense. And that's really interesting because running as a nonpartisan, it's been interesting to communicate that to the press and the public. What is that? Well, are you pro-life, pro-choice? It's like, neither. It depends. I mean, so I think historically they have put it on either side. Now, one thing that really bugs me about this particular topic is it's just, things are so tight and it's so 50-50 that it feels like the parties are desperate and that this is like an ancient issue. The Democrats have been running on this issue since 1973. They've had 50 years to codify access to abortion at the federal level, and they've never done it, and they've run on it for 50 years. The Republicans have been fighting about that for 50 years. So now this opportunity exists, and it's becoming politically relevant in a time when Nevadans are more concerned about the economy and jobs. The pandemic just wiped some people out, and we've lost people that will never get back. So the issue, my opinion, is that it's a political issue more than a practical issue, especially in Nevada with the way our system's set up. For those in states that don't have access to abortion, they are in a limbo zone, and that's up to them to fix or to deal with. So I believe it feels like this issue was resurrected in order to get people motivated and fired up to vote, and that's really annoying to me because we have many other problems and issues to deal with, and the division has changed over time. And
I know with talking to these ladies about abortion, we all have different views. And I think that was really important for you to say that, we are looking at this as a political thing because people may make decisions based off of their political views sometimes versus off of their human views, and their practical views, as you stated. But we were able to have a discussion and laugh and talk and, all these things. And we see things sometimes completely different. And then we have little things that we found that were very similar. And it just made me think about the world, right? And just our country and how divided it is right now. But it's because we don't get to have these type of conversations. We don't get to be around people that don't look like us or don't have our same culture, or because you may say that you're, one party affiliation. What would you do as a nonpartisan lieutenant governor to rectify the division in Nevada between parties?
As a nonpartisan, if I'm elected by the people, then that's a mandate from enough people in Nevada to get elected that the people want something different. So just showing up and having that mandate, it's a powerful statement that basically says the one person in the whole process who represents all the people has been elected by the people. I think the statement that Nevada can make in this election is, for the first time ever, they put a nonpartisan in this job, and it should be a loud signal to the parties that you're missing out on most of Nevadans. So I think that in an interesting twist, I don't believe there'd be bridging a divide. I kind of believe it creates this space to put the best ideas. So one thing that came up in talking about this is, so it's one thing to say, no abortion, we're pro-life. Okay, then what? So what are we going to do, and what's the role of government to support children that are not necessarily wanted, that will be born? Are we going to make equivalent investments into foster care and the schools? Are we going to take care of people? Raising kids and the challenges in the economy really impacts that choice. So that's another thing that I really like to bring to the conversation that a lot of partisans don't talk about. They're real simple. Democrats will say, we need more Democrats in the United States Senate. We can't even talk about this until we have enough. And that trending is that we have to have a majority or a supermajority before we'll even talk about the issue. That's not governing. That's just power politics.
How are we protecting the women that are living with illnesses such as cancers? If they were to get pregnant, how are they protected?
Well, that's a good question. I think I think what I learned recently is a lot of young people, young women who get pregnant, is they didn't know anything, and they may be in a cultural or housing or whatever situation where they can't talk about it easily, or there's a lot of stigma or judgment that comes with it, and there's consequences. There's cost to bodies and lives and careers, and in this, I mean, I'm a man, so I've never had to really struggle with this decision, and I want to honor that I never have. So, and I don't believe I will, but it. My biggest concern is mental health in Nevada is terrible. Access to mental health we are 47th, if not 50th, it depends on the day. We have a high rate of suicide. All of this is because of stigma and because we do not pay for it. We don't invest in primary care. I consider mental health primary care. And women, years ago, the big issue was, can a woman have an OBGYN be their primary care physician? And policy around that, because it's easier to put you in with whatever. So that comes back to choice. And it comes back to what is distinctive about being a woman in life, a human woman in this system, versus a man, where this issue is particular. And so I really want a system that, and I think the public system, and I want to be very clear about what I'm talking about, because I don't think a lot of people running for office are clear about what they talk about. I'm talking about the role of government. What should the state do? Well, since the people of this state have declared that abortion shall be available up to 24 weeks, and no one can change it, they use their most awesome power to do that, I think we are obligated to make sure that every person that this affects knows they have that right. They know they have this information. That is a public access issue, not a religious one. So I think it really, if there's a nuance that comes with a particular moral view or religious view, they need to take care of that. But as far as the government is concerned, there should be nothing that hinders someone's access. And the government has a responsibility to make sure these services are provided. Now, that is enforcing the law.
With the 24, say there was someone who got sick after those 24 weeks with an illness through medical, whatever, would they still be able to be?
It was Anton Scalia who always said the law should be understandable by the people. The way I read that law is, if it's the first day of the 25th week, it's a medical decision, and there isn't that guarantee. But also the question is that still an abortion? If there's a procedure that would terminate a pregnancy after 24 weeks, is that an example I've thought about and the research I've done was in contrast to the ethical religious directives, at that point, abortion may not be what the procedure is. It could be inducing labor of a premature child or something. And that is the critical detail. I think 22 weeks, again, I'm not a doctor, but there's a huge difference between a super preemie and so the survival rate is very different, and it's extremely expensive. Someone's going to pay for that. So I think in the situations where there's a medical issue that is after 24 weeks, but I think the procedure, I think you could say whatever procedure is different, but the law wouldn't protect, would not ensure the right to abortion or whatever might be the similar in those other weeks. And that's been it varies by state. So those weeks are a big issue.
And I think that goes into reproductive health issues, right? And health access, right? So if a woman's life is in danger, that's something that we have to consider as a state, and look at what does that mean? Like you said, on that 25th week, and something comes up where we're either going to lose this person that's productive in society, working, paying into taxes, versus having a baby that's not here yet, and it's going to take that person away, So I think justice is involved. I think reproductive health, we have to look at all of those things, and health access is one of those things that I definitely fight for minority communities. And so women are considered minorities in this country. And that's really important to me, just to know that I guess there's no language around that yet. What does it look like at the 25th week?
So can I ask you guys a question? Sure. If you were faced with this decision, you became pregnant or whatever, how much of the opinion of the guy or the person that you got pregnant with, how much does their opinion, feelings, thoughts play into your decisions about whether or not to maintain a pregnancy?
We were talking about this earlier. We were saying that there needs to be a part 2 of another thing that we were talking about, because we don't talk about that, right? We don't talk about how the man feels when it comes to abortion. We just hear these loud politicians throughout the country saying that, what they feel about a woman's body, but we don't hear that from the actual fathers. We don't hear from the actual people who want babies, and maybe the woman doesn't. I actually think it's a 50-50 thing, right? Obviously, you had to have someone that impregnated you, whether it was by sperm donation or whatever. But if you're with somebody and they want the child, you do have to listen to their side of it. But you also have to ask those hard questions. Are you going to be here? Are you going to help support? Even if we don't make it, are you going to be in this child's life, helping me financially? Because that's really most of the burden a lot of the times, but also raising that child, right? As mothers, we know like raising kids is super hard, and you need to do it with a partner. But if it came down to my life, to my health, his opinion doesn't matter.
Well, I appreciate that, because it's really, there's no equity in that situation, because, and I think, from my experience, my mom divorced when I was 3, so she was single mom, 2 kids. And my dad paid $100 per month child support. So, $200. But there was no substantial contribution to raising me. But my mom had resources. I mean, it was scarce, but we were never in danger. But also it wasn't an accidental pregnancy or whatever. So, but I've always been curious about that, because, I think people are responsible for their actions.
Get a vasectomy if you don't want kids, right? Why is the woman always burdened with the decision on whether to abort or to have? And if she does have, then maybe she's raising her by herself.
As far as like from the medical standpoint, like for me, I'm on a medication that I can't come off of for years and years because I have a condition called leukemia. So for me, my husband had a vasectomy. So I can't take birth control with the leukemia, with the chemotherapy medicine. So my husband has a vasectomy. That's where he kind of takes responsibility. But there's obviously times where the men won't get a vasectomy, or they're not in the position that I'm in. I feel like I'm very lucky.
I think there is some cultural expectation that this is a woman's choice. It is her body, but this is not all on her.
Right.
And I think, I don't know what the common terminology would be, but the deadbeat dad thing, enforcing some support of that. I think there is a role for government, and there has been some legal ways of ensuring people pay child support. One example I'll give you in Nevada is when I worked for the Osteopathic Licensing Board. And I think this applies to every license in the state. When you renew your license, you have to say whether or not you're compliant with child support. And there's absolutely no enforcement mechanism for that. So I will say I had a case where a licensee was not compliant, and the mother of the child did exactly what the law said, which is you need to show proof of it, that he was in arrears. And basically it was a very short conversation with the licensee. It basically said, we're not able to renew your medical license because you're in arrears on child support. And the remedy is for you to go to this court in that other state and get something from a judge that says you are compliant, or you will need to stop practicing medicine at the end of the year. And that's certain. Boy, did he come up with money quick and make that right. So part of that.
I love that.
And that triggered something in me where it's like, how do we, there's more to enforcing this. I mean, it seems, here's where that's a little odd. Well, you're going to take someone's ability to work away if they're not paying money. It's like, well, let's back that up a little bit. If there is no way to pay it back and that's dealt with, there's an exception, but we need to get to that point. So thank you so much for participating in this conversation. I really appreciate the candor and the discussion. And if, follow me on social, please share stuff that you like. And I fielded some questions like this on Instagram too. So if lingering questions come up or something like that you need more information or want more information or you want to tell me off, bring it on.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool beans.